am. I
There,
am.
there we go. So, how's it
Uh,
going this morning?
Good. We're on record, I'm hoping, right?
Yeah, we're all
All
good.
right, we're live. Woohoo! Well, I'm glad that everybody's joining us today. If you have any comments and questions, please put them in the comment. We'll pop them up on screen and we'll get back to you here. Probably towards the end, but you never know. We always just go with the flow around here. I want to also remind you that if you do have any additional questions, you can get a hold of Jeremy or I. The scrolling information on the screen is available. You can contact us. So we'd love to speak with you. So let's get started. Jeremy, let's do a little introduction, and we're going to do it this way.
Okay.
Talk to us about your background and how you learned a little bit about one-on-one training and what would qualify you to talk about this subject.
Well, for me, I grew up in a home where we ran 5 businesses. I started pushing a broom on a construction site when I was 5 years old, learning how to build houses with my dad. And then fast forward in life, I got into broadcast television, live event work, and that's 100% one-on-one training. And then I ended up in wildfire, which is one-on-one individual training. So probably vast majority of my life, this is just the way I've been raised and the environments I work in, and so it's a lot of fun to get to talk about it, and it's actually nothing new. So it's
well, yeah,
it's
and
things that are new.
that's good because now we're going to start talking about some of the basics, I think, but I want to apply it to the business owner like me that's a one-man shop or maybe very small, could be large too, but I don't have time to do this training. So let's just talk about basics. What is this one-on-one employee training? How would you define it?
Basically, it's another way to say entrepreneurship, something that's been going on for years. And I think the one question that a lot of people ask is, "Hey, I'm running a business by yourself. I'm a CEO and janitor of my company, so I totally understand. We have no W-2 employees here whatsoever. It's 100% 1099 subcontractor. But yet we do events that are in that up to $12 million that we work on around the country, and so it's timing and what we have time for and what we don't have time for are really important. And what we're going to be talking about today is how not to waste my time as an employer, as a manager, but also how not to waste the time of our employees or the people who are working with us.
Let's back up a little bit to a comment that you said. It's like you said you have sometimes 12 employees. Give us a little bit of background too. What are you doing with those employees, and
Well,
what is it?
depending on what I'm doing, I've been in charge of hundreds of people at one time, for certain events that we're working on. We're our business, the 240 Wedding Productions that I run. We're a production company, so we produce events, and there's people that work for us as subcontractors. There's other businesses that are working for us, and even our clients are all people that are learning something. And so my job, is as part of the way I run my business, is to step aside each of those people and help everyone learn along the way. And one of the important steps is no matter what event we're doing, whether it's a live event, whether it's a wildfire, we have people that we're training as apprentices along the way.
Well, and I'm assuming too that you are getting sometimes people that you don't work with every day, all the time. Is that correct?
Oh yeah, all the time.
Okay.
There's people that I work with 1 or 2 days a year. There's people where I work with 50 to 100 days a year.
So how are you being able to train them? Because to me, in my mind, training is very methodical and like a checklist. So give us some insight on how do you start doing that?
Well, the first thing that's really important is learning who that person is that you're working with and training, whether that's a business that I'm working with, whether that's a new intern. We're huge into interns where we work, and I don't think we've ever done a show without having an intern on the show. And last week, as an example, we had a new intern come just out of college, come and work with us. And the important thing there is to ask a lot of questions. Who is that person? What makes them tick? and what do they know and what don't they know? One of the most valuable things I can teach somebody else is they need to know what they're good at and what they're not good at, and be able to communicate that to people in a free environment. But they also need to be able to explain what are their gifts and talents, what are their skills that they have and don't have, and give people the freedom to talk about those things.
So when you get these group of people that are coming standing in front of you, it's like it seems like it's going to be more of a waste of time to sit and talk to each one of them. How do you start getting them involved and apply it to this training?
Well, for starters, um, I think just because of the environment that we're in our current culture, is a lot of this doesn't happen sitting and not sitting around coffee and talking, or sitting down in an office. This is um, like last week with that new intern I was talking about. We went out for lunch before the show that we were doing, and asked him a handful of questions. Asked him what he wanted to learn, what he knew, what he didn't know, some of those things. So that was 15 minutes of lunch. But then it was I started walking through the show and having him do things with me. Um, having him watch me. I was watching him at the same time, asking him to do different things. And then through that, you're picking up on, okay, what can I ask that person to do next? And what are they capable of? What aren't they capable of, through observation and through feedback. So a lot of this is happening while you're actually doing work.
Well, and how does that apply then a little bit differently if you have a different environment? Like if I have a more traditional or like a restaurant or, things like that that are different than that environment. Could you give us some insight on that?
Well, it's the big thing there is, your job and you know what you're good at, um, and what needs to happen. And so stepping in and doing one-on-one training with somebody is just, it's first about building that relationship, but second, it's providing an environment where they can fail. I guess I don't know, I can't speak to the restaurant specifically per se, but let's do woodworking for
There you
example,
go.
which isn't a lot different. Um, Asking somebody to do something that, if they completely fail, it's not going to cost me anything, because then you give tasks and watch somebody work. I think one of the most interesting things now is, for me, that could be a negative thing, is when you have somebody new, I have really low expectations of them understanding what I expect from them, because it's not fair for them to know. Um, when you ask somebody to come and load out a show, for instance, or we're gonna carry a bunch of lumber. Well, what's a bunch mean? What's load out? You know, how is somebody supposed to know those things? And so, can you come and work a show? What does that mean? Can you come and do the morning shift at a restaurant? Can fill in the blank? How many jobs have everyone that's watching this today done? And the job was different than you thought it was when you started. And so we can't hold people accountable for things they don't know. Um,
Well, and that's so true. But let me just put this into you because you just said that. Because what happens? I can't even get somebody to work. It's like, what about that's the hugest problem right now. How do we start to even, I guess we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the hiring process, but how do you build that relationship once you actually hired somebody and they don't seem like they want to work?
so it's kind of a tough question, for people to hear the answer to, not to answer. Um, the reason people don't want to work isn't that they don't want to work. It's, we have an entire society of people that were told that they can't learn how to work until they graduated college or they're a certain age. Principle that's really important for people to understand is, uh, people gain responsibility with experience. And so if we haven't allowed somebody to have experience, then how can we expect them to have the responsibility for that? And so the kid that you hire, um, early in high school, at your restaurant or your hardware store, and they only work an hour or two after school, or those are those people that are going to learn what work ethic is, and they're going to learn what the process is. So it's not that somebody who never had a job in their entire life until after college doesn't want to work. It's they've never worked. And so we got to take a look at that and understand that and meet those people where they're at, and start small. One of the things we do in our business is nobody subcontracts for us unless they're willing to come and show us, whether it's a show that they do, um, whether they're volunteering for somebody else. They have to show us what they know and what level they're at before we'll hire that person as a subcontractor to work for us on another show, because we need to know what they're capable of before we actually hire them.
So I know that you're talking about this, but we gotta, as an employee, I gotta set some standards. And it's like, this all seems like I'm wasting my time, but um, let's just talk about that a little bit more. I guess I'm not quite convinced yet. So you're telling me I just gotta take the time to get to know them better?
Oh, well, that's part of it. You can't you can't meet somebody where they're at unless you know who they are. And so, starting somebody young is one way to do that. Basically, helping raise that person, um, and which is the old model of apprenticeship. Back pre-industrial revolution, people would start being an apprentice at 10, 12, 13 years old. And now, like in my case growing up, if your dad was a woodworker, you grew up to be a woodworker. If your mom was a baker, you grew up to be a baker. Whatever your family did is what you did. And if you weren't any good at it, then they found, let's say you grew up in a, a a baking home or business, but you didn't have the skill set for that, but you worked best with the blacksmith, and you went and worked with the blacksmith from an early age on, and built those skills. And so um we just have to realize that what the environment is that we're in. And so we're not, if we don't do these things, we're actually wasting more time. How many hours has every employer spent hiring people that didn't work out?
True,
And if
true.
we start doing that math, it's great. How many people did we get angry with and fire, or they got mad and left? And then we're spending on now we're spending more time on the hiring process. We're spending more time in all these other places, and when we step forward and put our investment into time and people, that allows us to pick the right person in the first place and invest in that person. We're not putting a ton of time into the same thing over and over, which is really frustrating for everybody.
Well, yeah, and now you're starting to convince me, but I still want to talk about what's the difference then with conducting this type of training, because I'm hearing there's like I think you mentioned this to me earlier. It was accomplish based training and schedule based training. Can
Yeah,
you explain some of
there's
that?
I break down training into two: accomplishment based training, which is what I'm talking about today, and then schedule based training. Schedule based training is something that we give to somebody, and we we bless or check off the box on what they are able to do based on the schedule. So you watch these 10 videos, therefore you're capable of these 10 skills.
That's
Um,
scary. I just got to interrupt here.
yeah, but that's the way we do it. Schedule-based training is the way we do school and
Mhm.
college and different things. That's a lot of college courses are taught, and you need to get your degree. You have to go through and take a class, whether you know that skill already or not. It's it's based on a schedule. It's based on a checklist, and that's the culture that most trainings are set in. I cannot tell you how dangerous and scary um, defensive driving class with the state of North Dakota is every single year, because it's the exact same training. All in the 6 or 7 years I had to take it, it never changed. I have friends that are taking it. It's the exact same videos, the same everything now. And how many people are hurt falling asleep and hitting their head watching this training that's the same. But
Right.
it's the checklist training. Is it important training? Yes. If somebody's never has never experienced that training, is it important? Yes. So we're not talking about that. We're
Well,
um
yeah, but that I
it's
want to
based
just
on a schedule.
I want us to sit on that just for a second, because that is what seems so much more logical to me, because then that allows me that I can have this plan. I can have it on paper. I can kind of like when I get the new employee, then I can check off the
Yeah,
boxes.
yeah. It's okay. Thanks, Fred, for working for me. And here's the list of videos for you to watch.
Yeah.
And then I'm good to go. You watch the videos. Well, here's the trouble. And I'll use my industry for an example. If you make one mistake, honest mistake in my industry, somebody could die. Now, do I want to trust that Fred
No.
watched the video and he's going to rig a piece of truss right? No, I don't want to do that. And if you make a lesser mistake, you could ruin $100,000 audio board or a $10,000 speaker system, or burn down a building. So, and these are all simple, honest mistakes that most people take for granted with what you do at home. But in my industry, the action is just as simple, but the consequences are way different. And
Well,
so,
then let's move into that, because I think that's where you're leading to, right?
right. And so with accomplishment based training, there's a ton of different ways for somebody to learn something. We have there's books and videos and some of those schedule based training um, materials and resources are still utilized. It's just how we use it. So like the intern we started with talking about last week, had him watch a couple videos, but then he sat down with me. When we had that lunch we were talking about, we went through some of those points in those videos, but then I sat and or walked through with him. How do you do this? I showed him once. I let him show me that he knew what it was, and then I checked his work. And what we do there is we're setting up opportunities for success for people. One, but two, we're also doing we're watching that person prove that they're capable of that responsibility or that task or that skill. And I don't have to worry about that employee because or person working for me, because I've watched them. I've showed them once. I've walked through it with them once or twice. They've shown me a handful of times. I've let them do it a handful of times on their own. I've checked their work a handful of times, and now I can trust them.
Well, and that makes perfect sense, because then, we're actually doing a little bit more hands-on, so I can actually see if they're engaging. And, let's just talk a little bit more about that, because, I've got current employees. It's like, do I have to go redo all of what I've done already?
No, I think that gets back to what we were talking about earlier, meeting somebody where they're at. If you meet somebody where they're at, we're not for everybody listening, don't cringe too hard when I ask these set of questions. What training did you sit through that you knew 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago?
Yeah.
And you're sitting through that training and you're like, this is the dumbest thing ever because I already
Hmm.
know all this. Um, and then what, and then the flip side of that coin is, what task were you asked to do at a job at some point in your life that you had no clue how to do it, but you were expected to know how to do it because somebody else already knew it, how to do it. And so when we participate in accomplishment based training, we remove those two characters. Asking an accountant to sit down and watch a video on how to fill out a invoice is probably not the best use of their time or your time. Um,
Right.
in many cases, having them show me how have been doing it wrong for the 20 years of my business, probably more important. You know, um, I volunteered for an organization a couple years back, and it was kind of interesting because they asked me to come and volunteer for them because of what I do in my day job, and I've been doing at the time I'd been doing it for like 25 years, and I had to sit through their 40-hour class to volunteer with them to learn what I learned my freshman year in college,
Just to get the checkbox
just
off.
to check off the box to be a
Yep.
volunteer.
Yep. Well,
So
and
just think how frustrating that is for an employee.
I know sometimes there's industries, though, and businesses that are by regulations or laws that you have to do that. So that's not what we're talking about today. We're
No,
talking
well,
about a lot
we
of
we
different.
are and we're not, because you take a look at any electrician today in North Dakota, and they have to go through accomplishment based training.
Well,
There's some
true.
of the schedule based, but they have to go through an entire apprentice program
Hmm.
and prove those things. In national wildfire uh, response and wildfire, it's all accomplishment based training. Here's the class you take. Here's you learning how to do it by yourself. Here's you doing it with a group of people, and then you get signed off on those. And based on the speed of your accomplishments and what you've proven you can do, is how all of um, those activities or those trainings happen. Pipe fitters, welders, mechanics are all, regardless of what college somebody goes to, they still have to go through those same accomplishment based training. um,
Yeah, and then I'm hearing you say that term that you said earlier, this apprenticeship, because when we usually do hear that, it gets into those trades that you were talking about. So maybe we're going to go just a tish backwards, but I wanted to hear, that apprentice work before the Industrial Revolution. How do you explain some of that in that historical part? Because that's what seemed to change a lot of this along the way, isn't it?
yeah, apprenticeship, the way an apprentice worked and learned and got into a trade never changed for thousands of years. It wasn't until the Industrial Revolution that when we started running parts through a conveyor belt, we started trying to teach people with a conveyor belt. And that's why I said at the beginning that one-on-one employee training is nothing new. It's the way we did things for thousands of years. In the last 100 to 150 years, we're 200 years, we're realizing, hey, maybe we should go back to what worked for thousands of years. And and so and what we're seeing here and what we're talking about today is taking a good mix of both. But yeah, apprenticeship unchanged for thousands and thousands of years. But the important part that I think we've lost from apprenticeship is starting people young and and building the responsibility along with skills at the same time. So, just because somebody has a degree doesn't mean they have the skills.
True.
So whereas apprenticeship, one-on-one employee training that we're talking about today, it builds responsibility and skills and relationship simultaneously. And so there's a good balance between those three things, and that's what's been left out over the last couple hundred years.
Well, now let's start talking about some of that details of how do we do this? If I'm getting in that mindset of I need to change some of my thinking about the training being, check boxes or this more accomplished based training, let's talk about some of the pieces about how am I supposed to start doing this? Kind of give me some practical things.
So we've kind of hit on it already, but the biggest one is communication. And breakdowns in communication are the things that hurt the most. And part of that is we need to communicate what our expectations are, what our standards are as an employer, as a supervisor, as a manager, um, as a contractor, as a producer, all those things. We need to communicate those things clearly to what what's the job, how do I want the job done, and did you do it right or wrong? That's just basic communication in business and leadership 101. And so but then the flip side is we also need to be good listeners. Can, can you do the job? And then instead of waiting, we can't answer questions for people. That's, I guess that's a big part of communications is we answer a lot of questions for people and we never listen to what the actual communication back is. We
Well,
expect
I think it's because I'm in a hurry.
that's part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess, yeah, but I'm communicating to them all the time. But I guess I'm not listening and opening my ears, I would suspect.
Yeah. Because true communication is a two-way street, not a one-way. And so many times as a supervisor, as a boss, we're as an owner, this is my company, this is how I expect this to be done, blah, blah, blah. And I get that part of it. But at the same time, um, you know, oh, here's a great example for me. Somebody will like, well, why didn't you read this? I'm like, because I'm dyslexic. Um, Even if I did read it, I don't remember it. I don't probably did it wrong anyway. It's
And that's a good point, because we don't know some of those people until
right.
we start getting engaged with them. Because working with you, I didn't know that about you. And I had to communicate with you several
Yeah,
times before I could see that. So
yeah.
that's kind of what you're talking about,
If
right?
somebody sends me an email, they have to type slow so I can get it. Yeah, I'm a audible learner. But you don't learn those things about people unless you're communicating and listening to them and participating in true and full communication. You need you can't learn who somebody is if you're not listening. You can't learn what their and I think the next part of this is their skills and their talents. And How many times do we, as owners, as supervisors, as managers, ask somebody to do something that they're not skilled in or that doesn't meet their talents?
Yeah, I think too often. And I think that, I don't know if you're willing to kind of jump around in some thoughts here, but to me, I keep thinking about, maybe I have to change some of this hiring process, because I'm wondering if I'm getting the right people in, you
Yeah,
know?
exactly. Well, and yeah, so let's cover skills and talents quick, and then we'll talk about the hiring process when that happens. Um, you know, what's the job you need somebody to do? Does that job and this is tough because do we know what the job we need somebody to do? I'm horrible. I hate accounting. I'm a numbers person. I can sit and work on statistics and I do trig in my head every day and everything like that. I hate accounting with a passion. I don't understand business. I never ever want to understand tax law, and
Right.
and I'm grateful that there's people that think that's fun and choose that as a vocation.
Right.
Um, do I have the skills to do accounting? Yes. Is it a talent of mine? No. And and that gets back to that communication. So when we're working with somebody, when we're hiring somebody, is the job that we're asking somebody to do something that requires eye-hand coordination?
Hmm.
Is it something that requires somebody to be able to do um, and I don't say this wrongly, but a mindless task. I mean, my kids run a fishing tackle company, and there's certain jobs in the manufacturing process that are mindless. Like
Right.
you can sit and watch a couple movies and make a lot of spinners, for instance.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and you can tie, once you learn how to tie a knot or or do a widget, you can somebody can listen to a podcast. They can talk on the phone. There's a lot of things they can do and do that mindless task. There's other tasks that are incredibly stressful and and complicated for one person, and the next person that's a mindless task. So understanding that and understanding each person's skills and talents and what we're asking them to do. A great example that I saw last year is there was a business who didn't want to have a young girl do the cash register because that was for the adults. But
Yep.
um, but the cash register was one of these new fancy um, iPad deals
Right.
and stuff. By the end of the day, the adults had decided that the teenager was the only person that was ever going to run the cash register for the rest for the rest of the season, and and uh, and this teenager is really good at math, and
Right.
so what the teenager needed to learn how to do is how do I fill out the reports and everything else, but they had the technology skills and they had the mathematical talents to open the register in the morning and close it in the evening and to do the reports and stuff. But that person was able to do that. That young person was able to do that with the mentorship of somebody who'd been doing business for years. And
And I
so,
think and I think that's true, because like some of these skills, like when you're talking about doing some of those fishing lures, you can just sit there and do it mindlessly. Some people really enjoy that, because
yeah,
then they don't have to engage with somebody else if they're more of an introvert.
right,
So
exactly. You don't want your introverts to be at the front desk.
right. And
And
sometimes we're asking people to do that.
And you don't
because
want your extroverts to be sitting in the back room blocked by themselves.
yeah, because that's exactly what I was thinking, because that, so many times can't you can almost tell that as a customer, right? I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
that's kind of what we're getting to. It's like, how well do you want your business to thrive?
I
And
walked
this
into
is
a
what it
business
gets to.
last week and it took everything in my power to actually do the business I wanted to do there because the person at the front desk was so um I, first reaction would be it's a bitter angry person who hates their job.
Yeah.
But it was funny because I was forced to go through what we're talking about today, and it's just like it's a person who's just not skilled to be there. I mean, it wasn't that person's fault for being that way. That's the supervisor or the boss's fault for putting the wrong person in that that position.
But you know what? As a business owner, I need some bodies. Literally, I need people to fill these positions. And sometimes you're gonna pick. Sometimes you only have like one or two people applying. So it's like that's, I think, the hardest part. It's like, oh, it's great, but how do I get what I need?
Um, so I'm going to say something, and just so everybody that's watching realizes, I'm saying this to myself. Also, so I'm not pointing a finger at anybody. Um, but when we settle and fill a hole, we only hurt our own business and we hurt our customers, which hurts our business. Um,
Yeah.
and then there's another interesting thing that just happened recently in a town here in North Dakota. Um, one of my favorite restaurants just closed in North Dakota because they couldn't get any staff. And which that's horrible for me. Favorite
Right.
restaurant closing. The restaurant next door bought it.
Oh,
And the newspaper asked them in a story, "Why do you think you can get staff for this restaurant or for this and starting a
mhm.
different restaurant in
Yeah.
that building when the previous owner couldn't?"
Yeah.
And the answer was kind of cocky, but it was also very telling. And um, and that new owner said, "We never struggle with staff because our staff is our family. We
There
care
you
about
go.
family, and when you treat staff like they're part of the family and they're part of the business, you never have a problem with staff." And it really caught me, um, really hit home for me, I guess, because um, I've been in my industry now for 30 years. There's only one place I can't go back, or there's a one place that I don't go back and work for from my first job 30 years ago to now. Um, every place I've worked, still have a positive relationship with, still work with, still rely on those people back and forth. Now 30 years later.
Well,
Um,
and that's what you're talking about with the communication, right? I mean, people end up becoming our family if they're going to really invest in our businesses.
because we've built a relationship. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's now and I'm not an employee. I'm not the underling. I'm part of the mission of
Of
that.
making a success. I mean, in learning about the business. I mean,
And
I,
and
yeah.
and here's something that also that's interesting that a lot of people don't understand, and it's taken out of context, and it's really taken to an extreme that's not healthy, but it's still a good thing to understand is what is somebody's why.
Yeah.
And I think there's a book, what's their why and all that other stuff out there, but it's important. Why is that person working for you? Why is that person applying for their job? Are they looking to use it as a stepping block to their next job? Or is
Yeah.
it the career that they want? Um, is it because their mom and dad told them they had to get a job or else they can't get a car? Is
Right.
it I have to pay for college and so I'm working, and then because that also understanding that as an employer, as a supervisor, is really important because what I'm going to put different amounts of energy and and work into that person differently so I can help them achieve their why instead of getting what I need out of them. But both happen if
But
that
yeah,
makes
I was going to say both happen, because to me, it's like, if I've invested in this person, I got to, to me, how I see it, I got to make this thing work out. And I have to evaluate what did I potentially mess up here in this whole process as a business owner? Well, maybe I did. So looking at that, then I'm like, now what am I going to do go forward? And to me, it's like, I love the family thinking, because that's what it is.
One of my best employees, for about a 5 to 10 year period, well, I guess it would be for about 8 year period, was a person that I knew would never ever work for me because they were going through high school and college.
But you could see what they wanted
Yeah, but
and the why.
yeah,
Okay.
and this young man is now a dad. He's a science teacher, an award-winning science teacher. He's an award-winning coach at
Mm-hmm.
his school. It does a ton of work in with plays and drama and different things like that. Every once in a while, he'll come and still work for me. Um, um, when we have something on a weekend or during the summer. But he learned a lot from me. I taught him a lot. I learned a lot from him, and we had this just great relationship for those years. And I knew that he would never be somebody I worked with all the time.
Right.
But we
But
both
you helped
benefited.
him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, and we hung him from some places we probably shouldn't have when we were in college. Uh, but that's the power of understanding the why. I don't have a hard feeling because he went and became a teacher, and I put
Right.
all this time into training him to be a production guy because I knew where he was going. I knew his why. Um, Same thing's true as if I know somebody really wants to get into video and all I need is an audio person. They're not going to ever be happy because they're not learning what they want to do. The other part of that though is I look at my own life. I went to college to be a DJ on the radio. Oh, thank goodness that didn't happen.
uh,
Because I just don't do well locked in a little box. Um,
yeah.
and so, but because people understood my why and what I was good at, those get skills and talents and where I really wanted to go, I ended up in video production. And at the end of the day, if I could only do one thing ever, it would be lighting. People are like, "Why lighting?" And I'm because
Right.
lighting is really cool. There's so many things that uh, you go to a concert, you go to an event, and everybody looks at the talent that's there, but the only reason you can see the talent is because of the lighting.
Yeah, and I didn't even think
Yeah.
about it until you
And
said
and
it. So
and for me, that's one of the things that I'm really good at.
yeah.
And I love doing that. I love telling stories with light. And it's a geeky thing for me.
Yep.
It's my one thing that I would prefer to do over anything else. Am I good at a ton of other stuff? Yeah. But that's for me, that's my why. Um, and
Well,
so helping people understand those things, and it doesn't matter getting back to your restaurant, bakery,
yeah.
accounting office, doesn't matter what job it is. If you understand why somebody's there, you can work with them better.
Well, and I would agree with that. So let's move. Or I guess I should ask you before we move on to talking about of that hiring process a
Yep.
bit. Is there anything else that you wanted to say about the what we've been chatting about?
I think the biggest thing, you've heard me say it a bunch, but it's probably the most important principle in working with people. Doesn't matter if it's in the business relationship or even if it's your own kids or family members. When we meet somebody where they're at, everything goes better. And
Yeah.
and and um, doesn't matter if it's a good situation or a bad situation. It's just when we meet people where they're at, it makes everything go better. And so, um, when when the person asks this question, I can't tell you how many times I've heard this. Well, Jeremy, everything you're talking about is all well and good, but what do I have to do to keep an employee long enough to train them?
True.
Well, have you ever met them where they're at? Because if you meet somebody where they're at, that's going to help you figure out what level of training you're going to do. It's going to help you figure out what they're capable of and what you should train them to do and what jobs they're going to be good at. And you're going to help build those relationships. And that's meeting somebody where they're at is the foundation
Hmm.
to every relationship for every training situation that there is. And from there. And now, Larry.
Now and now hiring. So yeah, what's so important about that? Because I could add a lot of feedback on this one too. So we might have to do that a little bit
Well,
here. So
yeah, well, and from your background, Sue, what are the biggest frustrations you think people have in the hiring process?
well, in the hiring process, I think what they've done is that they just have those same standard questions, and I'm not sure. Sometimes I've actually sat through a couple interviews, myself over the last couple of years while I've been self-employed, just to kind of test the waters. And some of the questions are just those standard old questions. It's like you're not finding out anything about me.
Right. Um, I I think it's really funny. One of the jobs I got, the question was, "Do you know how to do a PowerPoint presentation?" And my answer was yes.
Yep.
2 years into the job, somebody go I jokingly said, "Wow, I did my first PowerPoint presentation." And my boss goes, "But we asked you if you knew how to do that when you interviewed." And I said, "I knew how to do it. I just had never done it." And and the look on his face was like, "Ah." Um, and for me, it was easier for me to do a video, to go shoot video and edit video than to put together a PowerPoint presentation because I'm not a big Microsoft fan.
Yeah.
Fill in the blanks, blah, blah, blah. But, what people don't realize is at that point, um, for 14 years, I taught people how to use their PowerPoint and fixed their PowerPoints, but I had never done a PowerPoint presentation myself.
Yeah,
And
and that's just that was your
yeah,
your talent.
yeah, and so but the question was one thing and the reality is something different.
Exactly. And
And
that's on the hiring process. Yeah.
and so, um, so what people don't understand is by understanding how we're gonna train people, what are requirements and all those other things, that needs to drive our hiring process instead of letting our hiring process drive our training.
Yeah.
And so it's a cart before the horse type of conversation because once you understand who somebody is and how they fit your business during the hiring process, then you know how to train that person.
Yeah. And makes
Or or
perfect
or
sense.
I said earlier, don't settle and fill a hole. How many people are we training that we should have never hired in the first place?
Right. Right.
And that's a tough question for a lot of people to go, "Whoa."
It
Uh,
is. And that's where I have some comments, and just to let Kate know, we'll answer her question. I've written it down here too, here in a little bit. But what I wanted to add on that hiring piece is that, to me, I believe when you're talking about this accomplished based training, that while I'm hiring and talking to them, I should be asking them a lot different questions than those ones that are just on the blank, that on the sheet that I'm expected to ask. So, because to me, it's like when you start the engagement of a conversation, you can already start telling where people are leaning towards when you ask some of those basic questions. And to me, it's like go off in that direction to ask some more questions, like what's your goal in life? Where do you want to be?
yeah, and what was the question that they just
What was
asked?
about a non-compete? When do you have an
And I think
employee?
I think that answered. Let's bring that question back up again. I think that's a great question for this. Is do not compete clauses. There's certain areas, broadcast television,
Yep.
news reporters, different things like that, where I think do not compete clauses, non compete agreements are really important. Um, but at the same time, that's something else that maybe works better in oh, how do I want to answer that, Sue? I'm sorry. Um,
I've
if I have somebody, if I during the interview process, if I get the feeling that this is somebody that's going to compete against me,
mhm.
those are things we talk about. Um, and and in my industry anyway, there's this huge, I can't have somebody else competing against me mentality, especially in North Dakota, when the reality is we don't have enough people doing the jobs that I do anyway. How and so I'd probably take the opposite side of that. And I'm trying to create as much competition as possible.
And
Um,
I
that
was
I can work with.
And I was just going to say that, because to me, one of my interview questions that I used to ask people a lot was, what do you want to be? What, if I hire you, what position do you want to get to
Mhm.
within this company? And I was always looking for the people that wanted to get my position or to go above. And that's where you get to this potentially answering this question about this non-compete agreement. And
Yep.
without knowing what type of industry or business that we're talking about specifically, we can only answer it generally. But to me, I want competition in my business. What I do and what you do, Jeremy, it's like, I agree with you 100%. People feel like competition is bad, but it's not. So that's our answer. I guess we're in agreement with that one. Sometimes we aren't,
And, you
Jeremy.
know, and Kate asked that question. Kate, what industry are you in? If you can put
Yeah.
that in the comment
Yeah.
section. So, because one of the things I've done, I get told I'm horrible at business, which is maybe true in some situations, but there's a lot of jobs that I'm getting older and I would rather do bigger, more complicated jobs. And so I've actually helped a handful of people start companies to replace and take over the jobs I no longer wanna do.
Being
And
more
so
selective.
yeah, so
Hmm.
I can be more selective in what I'm doing,
Hmm.
let those younger kids do the younger jobs that, mean you
Like
gotta
out
stay
at
up
a
late.
like out at a concert, like outdoor concert, that you're gonna have to be
Yeah, or,
enduring all kinds of stuff.
and for in my industry,
Hmm.
I would rather help somebody become a wedding DJ than ever deal
Doing
with
it.
doing events
Hmm.
like that, um but we did an event this last week, well, the one I had the intern with, everything went nice and smooth, and it was about as complicated as a wedding DJ event, but it was a high-end, um, a banquet um, for an awards banquet, and those are those things where I'm building relationships and teaching clients. Service industry, let's see what she says here. Don't want others to provide the same service. Yeah. Um, the other part of that is, for me, I have, I let me tell I guess a story about video production. When I started in video production 30 years ago, an edit suite was $300,000 to build, for a broadcast quality edit suite. Uh, so just, um, and the video that we're doing today live on air, I can't even comprehend how many hundreds of thousands of dollars in gear it would take to do what we're doing today for this, live event. Um, and as gear got cheaper and video is a service industry, everyone can now go in for probably the better part of 5 grand, get all the gear to do a video that's better than what cost $300,000 for us 30 years ago. So it's a
And
pretty, but the difference is, and this is what I think is really important for people to remember in the service industry. Um, I have 30 years of customer service training and relationships and mistakes that I've made. And because of that, the service I'm able to provide is going to be better and more valuable to the clients that I want to work for than the person that's new and trying to compete with me. And I've lost a lot of clients in 30 years who have went with somebody else, who, getting back to that non-compete, those are the best, clients I have now, because they've returned and they won't ever go anywhere else.
well, and then I have a little different perspective too, is that how I look at it is that I can't, I mean, again, we're pretty straight shooters here, Jeremy. So sometimes these people might not like these answers, but I've been around for 30 some years doing business. And it's like, I want those people in a competition to be my networking. I want to be able to go to them, because we are all made so differently. We're never actually going to do it exactly the same anyway.
Yep.
So, when you talk about those non-compete agreements, like, yeah, I know that they're needed at times. However, if I raise them up, they're doing a great job. They're going to still do it in a different twist, in a different way. So, I am always a half full kind of girl, so I'm going
Yeah,
to look at it more positively.
and so one of the things that's happened in North Dakota just recently is one of the bigger businesses in my industry just shut down. Um,
Okay.
and and so and it kind of caught a lot of people off guard. People that I'm normally in competition with, I now know, hey, I can't do your event, so you should go to this company, and I can't do this event, and you should go to that company because I we have those relationships with those people.
Yeah.
And so um,
You
the
never,
the fact that I can send somebody to the right place, knowing them, is more important than not having a not compete clause for me.
and you never know who and what you're going to need in the future for whatever environment you're in, or business.
And I think the other part of this, getting back to our, I guess the reason we're our on our topic here is um we never know when somebody's going to come back. So
Hmm.
I think one of my favorite stories about this, and this is, I guess, one of the things I missed in my notes here, is providing the ability to fail. And if I can talk about, can I talk
Yep.
about
Yep.
failure a little bit?
Yeah, that'd be a good
I
one.
know nobody watching this has ever failed or made a mistake,
Never.
so I know I'm unique in this. Um, but I'm going to talk about it in the most stressful environment that anybody could think of, and then I'll talk about it in a broadcast situation. When I get a new trainee in, or somebody, even if it's somebody who's um, got more experience than me, but they come in and working for me in a wildfire situation. And when I say wildfire, when you see the big flames on TV with the
Mm,
big airplanes and stuff, for years I worked with a type 2 incident management team. I was in charge of all the public information during the number one priority fires in the nation on
okay.
several occasions. So pretty stressful situations. And we're working with the public who's in fear of losing their
Hmm.
homes, their
Right.
communities. And the first thing I tell people is, when they come and work for me, I said, this is how we operate here. The key to success is failure, and we'll learn how not to repeat our failures together. And you're like, uh, we're serious?
Hmm.
Because the reality is we're all going to fail. Um,
Right.
we don't grow if we're not failing. We're not trying if we're not failing. My job as a supervisor, like I said earlier, is to provide opportunities for success for the people working for me. Um, but I also need to give them the freedom to know that if they fail, that's not the end of the world. It's just, it is what it is. And some failures are more painful than others.
Hmm.
And if we operate like that in a wildfire situation, because we know we're and here's what's important about a wildfire situation, for people to understand, is there is no right answer in most of those cases. The reason
Right.
it's a national emergency is because there are no right answers. Our
Hmm.
job is to get that incident stabilized and to stabilize the public and what's going on, and to make the best of a non-winnable situation.
Yeah.
That's the definition of an emergency.
Hmm.
Now let's step backwards to our jobs and what we're doing. And and what's important there is, I got to think back here. It's probably 17, 18 years ago. I had an intern at a show, and he was incredibly talented. And my director was screwing up bad, for this show. And this intern was doing everything possible and not listening to the director to try to save the show. And I went back and I chewed out that intern for not listening to the director. And I'm like, and he goes, but the show would fail. And I said, if you did what the director told you, I would be chewing the director out for making bad mistakes, and not you for not listening to the director right now.
Right.
And it was not a heated discussion, but it was very blunt, is the best way to say it. About 2 years ago, um, um, this kid that was an intern for me then, owns a successful production company in Minnesota, video production companies. And he goes, remember that first butt chewing you ever gave me? Yeah. And he goes, I just gave it today. And he goes, it wasn't until I gave it to somebody today that I realized how important of a lesson that failure for me was back then. And
Well,
and a lot of people would have fired him my
mhm.
industry. He would have got fired and thrown off the show, but we used it as a failure to learn from. And and everything went better then, and now it's carrying over now.
Yeah, and I think that that gets into that where we want to just keep our networking. We want to keep positive in what could be a negative type of situation where we don't want people to compete against us or whatever.
Mhm.
So I'll always go on the more positive view on that always. And we're getting close to being done here and wrapping up. So I want to just say, do we have I have a few more comments on the hiring process? Because I have a couple additional thoughts on that. What about you, Jeremy?
Yeah, I got a couple too. Is there any
All
good
right.
comments here that we need to or questions that we need to cover? Well, we'll see if there's questions. I think the biggest thing on the hiring process, while they're looking for questions for us, is um, if we take the time to know what the job is we need somebody to fill, um, and we hire accordingly, and we don't settle to fill that hole. Um, it just makes things smoother, and and so when things go smoother, then we're not beating our head because we're wasting our time, and we're going to keep employees longer because we're not wasting their time.
I agree. And my last comment on that too is that pretty much uh, just to be a talk to them and visit with them. You know, that is the biggest deal. Is that I'd rather have people just talk.
Hmm.
You know, and have a visiting kind of interview because that's where you're going to pull out their sweet spots.
And that comment that just popped up here, if we can bring that up again, um, it's somebody said straight up warning. It's just a straight up warning. The power of honesty is huge.
Yeah.
It's, you know,
Well, that's what we're talking about in the interview process. To me, it's
yeah,
like let's
yeah.
talk.
Yeah, be honest with people. It's always better. I'll never forget the first time I made somebody cry on a show because I asked, when we're in show mode, we're kind of like in air traffic controller mode.
Yeah.
And I asked somebody to do something and I asked them to do it and it didn't work. And I just walked over and I did it for them and I went back and I never said anything afterward or at all. And after that event, this gal that was doing lighting for us is just totally, and I'm like, no, sorry. It just didn't happen. I needed the light to turn the color that I
Right.
needed it to when I did or whatever. And and nothing personal.
Right.
But being honest and and those things are super important so nobody knows.
Yep.
Like one of the things I tell everybody is, don't assume I'm mad at you unless I use the words I'm mad and this is why. Because because I get super serious.
Yep.
Um, you'll one of the things I do with at a lot of events and different things, wildfires, is I'm going to say please and thank you now, because when I'm serious, my job is to give orders and make sure that the event happens, that the fire happens,
Right.
or whatever. But if I'm angry, if I'm upset, or if I'm frustrated, I'll use those words to let you know, that so,
Yeah.
and that's all part of that building relationship also.
Well, good point. This has been great discussion, Jeremy. And I just want to ask before I make a few ending comments, do you have any last thoughts here?
No, I think the big thing is, if we take the time to get back to our roots of one-on-one training, if we take the time to invest in younger people, and give them the opportunities, then I think it's going to make our jobs as supervisors way easier in the long run. We're not gonna waste as much time trying to hire people, as many people do, and we'll
Yeah.
have better employees and better products because of it.
I agree full heartedly. Well, as our time is ending here, I want to mention to everybody at 1:30 p.m. Central Time, we will be back here. We'll be talking about don't get stuck alone,
Yep.
and about leadership skills and how to keep you free from sticky situations. We'll have lots to share about that. So please join us back then. So we are wrapping up, and we appreciate your time today. I don't see there's any more questions or anything.
Yep. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you guys all at 1:30.
All right.
Thanks.